So it's kind of a rolling theme here to not start on time. So should be expected. All right. So we're back with difficult discussions. I am Johnny. I have a new guest here today. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. Go right ahead, sir.
Hi, my name's Kevin.
All right. So,
Come on, Kev.
hey,
What do you want me to say?
if you
Am I
want
selling you guys a car or what?
a little bit about yourself if you want, let people know where you're coming from, but it's all right. It's all good. Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself real quick.
All right, Vernon, been on the show just I think every week in different roles. Educator. So I was telling Kevin beforehand, I used to be a teacher when I was fighting the good fight. Now I'm just a suit. But overall, being an educator is what I am, and I think that experience and gathering information from multiple sources is how you educate yourself. And you can't speak on things till you're educated on them or experienced in them. It's up to you.
I would agree with that. So, just a little quick, so were you a coach too?
Yeah.
I seen that. I creeped your Facebook page because your friend requested me. I'm like, all right, I'm going to check this guy out. And just when COVID started, I sold my martial arts academies. I had two of them. And so I had a taekwondo school and I had a jiu-jitsu school. And I worked with kids every day, a lot of kids with a lot of different problems. And it was really rewarding watching these kids blossom and do better because of martial arts and structure. So I get what you're saying about being an educator for sure.
Hand-to-hand combat. When you have to teach that, it's different ball game.
Yeah, but you got to realize some of these kids are scared of their own shadows, or they're bullied. They have no self-confidence. You teach them how to kick, you teach them how to do an arm bar, something that builds confidence in them. And that's a lifelong something you give them for their whole life.
Oh yeah, I coach wrestling. So.
There you go. So jiu-jitsu is just a little bit opposite of wrestling. So I get you understand it.
Yep.
Wrestlers are tough. Wrestlers are grinders. So
bad ears.
Yeah, I know my cauliflower ears are just about gone.
Well, tonight we are going back to what we actually discussed in our first episode overall in terms of racism. So we're going to do something a little different here. This week we're going to implement the fixed Q&A section. So we are going to go for roughly an hour, let them have their conversation. We will monitor the comments for any questions that you guys have. At that time, we're going to start to address those questions and continue the dialogue while intermixing them in as well. So stick around, be vocal. If you have something you'd like to, have represented on the show, we will address it. So let's get started. Like we said, the topic tonight is racism. I will give you the floor, Kevin, since you're new here, and give us a little bit of perspective on your thoughts on the subject.
Well, this is kind of this is one of my first times talking about it online. And, before me and you kind of went back and forth on Facebook, John, and I wanted you to meet me for lunch because I want to talk to you in person so you could actually, we could talk freely. But I think right now, racism is a problem in America. I think there's all kinds of stuff going on. I think a lot of this stuff, let me back up. We had a friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine, stop by the shop yesterday. He brought us lunch. He's one of our reps for an engine rebuilding company. He's black, and we've always talked about this. Jesse, what about this? What about this? So all of us were upstairs talking about it. He brought up some pretty good points, and made me think. So I did a little research today. Like he was saying, how many black CEOs are in the United States? I never, ever, ever thought to look that up. I looked it up today, and there's 4. And one of them is a CEO of my favorite store, Lowe's. And, I've always thought to myself that that's a very well-ran store, and how that conversation came up, and he's saying it's hard for the black man to get to spots where the white people are and stuff like that. And, so I started researching this stuff, and he had a lot of good points. I'm a firm believer, I don't care what color you are. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole. If you're a good person, you're a good person. That's just the way I look at things. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and all that. You can ask me all the questions you want. I have a daughter-in-law who is black. I have two my son's obviously white, and I have two grandkids that are biracial. So, I worry about that type of thing in the world today because people are unfair. And, my daughter-in-law is dark, and my first grandson, he's very light-skinned. And people had asked her if she was the nanny for a while. So that kind of upset her. Now, my second grandson, he's dark. So they don't even look like brothers. You know what I mean? So I know that they're going to have a hard time. It's just the world's a shitty place right now. And I think, honestly, it's not getting any better. That's kind of where I'm coming from on all that.
Okay. Now, Vernon, what is your take? And we have discussed it before, but for new viewers, what is your perspective of racism in the United States today?
I think the difficult conversations that have come about racism, especially this year, is this element of racism being tagged into one definition. So the one definition is kind of cloaked in the verb of racism. It's the overt acts. Is last century or post slavery and segregation, Jim Crow is the KKK, is neo-Nazis. It's this dangerous thing that everybody can agree on. I think from these conversations, you talked about it last week, I think nobody wants to disagree on certain things because you throw out what we all know and agree on. But then I think it's definition number two, and I think that's where the conversation has come this year with racial tension so high, is that the system that we all see, recognize, some benefit from, some are oppressed by, we see that system as being racist. So if you benefit or you participate in that system or accept that system, that is a part of practicing racism. And until you don't want that system there, until you actively work against that system, you're still participating and benefiting from it. And I think that's the hard part is Facebook conversations lead people to frustrating times where I know I've talked to many Caucasian males and they're, well, I got called racist on Facebook. I got called racist on Facebook. And they just think everybody just calls them racist as like a defense mechanism. And I always ask, well, what did you say? And do you see where the other person's coming from? And it also comes from, even though overt acts aren't acceptable now, every time an act happens, the PTSD within the Black community as a whole comes up, and you remember Emmett Till, you remember segregated South, you remember those things, and you can only draw comparisons because it's not that long ago.
Now, one other aspect to racism that I feel that both sides typically come at odds would be the perception of privilege in relation to racism. Whereas, a person that's a minority would look at someone who is not and feel that they have basically benefits that they get to enjoy in this country because of their race. Whereas a person not getting that benefit not only is lacking the benefit, but also is having it used against them as a detriment. And I've found in my dealings online and social media, for a lot of people who have that perception, the pushback to that is that's not really a thing. There is another factor that you're not recognizing causing the struggles that you're dealing with. Whereas if you work harder, you can overcome. And I guess the perception there is we can work to overcome. However, we have to recognize that the bias is present and understand that people in the minority position have to work that much harder to overcome that additional step. So, in that regard, in relation to racism, Kevin, I'll give you the floor. What would be your response to that?
I think that, let me word this very carefully. I think you could be whatever you want to be in the United States of America or in this world if you work hard at it. Um, I think, like, I notice like how I get treated different. Like, I'm in the truck repair business, Johnny, right? So I look like I'm dirty sometimes. I walk into the bank, I got greasy clothes on, whatever. Okay, they treat me absolutely different. If I'm wearing dirty clothes, or if I go in there with my dress clothes, there's no doubt about it, right? So I know kind of how that feels a little bit, and I kind of would think to myself, that's kind of shitty. So I can understand where you come from. Um, I don't know about white privilege because I grew up working since I've been 12 years old. So everything I have, I've worked for my life. I'm a self-made man. I own two companies. I have 16 different people that work for me. So that's 16 families that I take very serious, taking care of them. You've dealt with me, Johnny. I'm loud, but I'm fair. I've never had white privilege. I wish I did. I wish I grew up in the Trump family or the Biden family where I never had to work and I wanted to pony and just showed up the next day, or, Steve Jobs' kids or whatever. I don't know how that is. So as far as white privilege, I don't know what it is. I've worked. So,
but Kevin, so I like your comparison to how you're treated in the bank when you walk in and you're coming fresh off of your blue collar job and you look like a blue collar employee. And not to like dig into your personal and everything because you own two businesses, but you've gone into a bank probably, and when you wanted to get a business loan, you didn't go that same manner, right?
I will tell you, I never got a business loan. I never had to get a business loan. When I walk in the bank, I'll just be, I didn't really want to say it, but when they pull up my bank account so I make my deposit, all of a sudden it's like, hello, sir, how are you? It's like, okay, how phony is this?
Absolutely. So the funny thing, Kevin, is it doesn't matter if I'm wearing a suit, that same response happens. So that's where the difference is. Like I tell people all the time, I know I look like Big Dumb Jock. I know my history and everything, but the shock when people hear that I'm an assistant principal, I'm a high school administrator, and I've been one since I was 29. But when people hear it, you don't necessarily just see, oh, because he's a coach or he look, which I have that look too. But it's not my attire, because I wear suits every day at work. Everybody knows that. When I'm in front of kids, I wear suits.
And a mask now. And a mask now.
Yeah. But I can't take off being black and the stereotypes associated with that. And it may not be towards, people may not do it towards you or visible to you, but I've had to testify a lot in education. I mean, I've testified for children, against children, in front of referees and judges for criminal matters, for civil matters. I mean, whatever. When I go into Oakland County and I'm sitting there in my suit, and I'm in Pontiac, I don't get looked at as, oh, am I someone's lawyer here? Sometimes it is, oh, sir, what are you here for? And that's not saying that everybody is racist, but it's those implicit biases that exist where you don't know if I'm a lawyer, you don't know if I'm a defendant, you don't know if I'm a parent, you don't know if I'm a prosecuting attorney. I mean, but the negative connotations, no matter what I'm wearing, no matter where I'm at, exists because of my skin color, which it doesn't happen to other people, not people of color. And I think the other thing you talk about is privilege. And people take privilege, my Caucasian friends take privilege as opportunities for financial success. Like that's what it's always categorized at. It's some form of laziness and lack of earning what you've accomplished. That makes you privileged compared to what your life has actually been. But when white privilege is mentioned, it's getting the benefit of the doubt in so many situations. So if you look up the probabilities of African American males getting small business loans, or if you look up how police brutality numbers deviate from white males and their African American counterparts in the exact same situations, is that benefit of the doubt. And I always say, when I get pulled over, officer says, you know, where are you going? Not how are you doing, sir? Hey, I had you back there, got you at, 40 and a 35. I don't get that. I get, hey, where are you going? What are you doing? So the treatment that you may get if you're leaving a highly populous area of bars and get pulled over, I get that treatment when it's sunny outside. I get that treatment when it's, a winter morning if I get pulled over. And those are the things about privilege. It's not necessarily the privilege of gaining wealth, getting opportunities handed to you without hard work. It's the absolute removal of doubt from good intentions.
Yeah, but you cannot paint everybody with the same brush. I mean, not everybody treats you like that way. Just like not all police officers are bad. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's I think you have to take it on a case by case thing. And believe it or not, I've never really thought about this stuff in depth till yesterday when I was talking to Jesse, and then I was on with Johnny last night. I really wanted to do this because it wasn't because I was going to come on here and be all judgmental and this and that. I didn't understand a lot of it. So what better to educate myself, like you said at the very beginning of this stuff, right? I really didn't know how a lot of that stuff went into play. Now, I've been pulled over by cops. My wife was pulled over. We had a problem with a cop a long time ago when we lived in Commerce. There was a tree hanging over the road. I had to get home to get my son because he had a doctor's appointment. And he asked me, he's like, you can't see the cop car sitting here? Just start going off on me. I'm like, dude, my house is right there. Well, I was driving that van. He remembered the minivan. He pulled my wife over on the way home from the grocery store. What are you doing? Where are you at? What are you drinking? Are you drinking? She's like, I went to the freaking grocery store. So believe me, they act like assholes to us too.
Right.
There's bad.
And that's the great point that, yes, it exists, but it's interesting. I don't think all white people are racist. I know for a fact not all white people are racist, but there are racist systems in place. There are those interactions that we have not overcome.
I would agree with that, and I would agree with that totally.
Implicit biases. A few weeks ago, I wound up watching the movie Crash. You remember that movie from like 15 years ago? It's one of those tales where.
Was it Richard Gere in it or something? Or
I don't know. It's a bunch of individual stories that wind up intermingling and intertwining, and it just gives a scope of bias, implicit bias, racial discrimination, things like that. So I always think back to my field, my work, education, and as much as I love people I work with, they work hard. I don't think that they're racist, but they have to acknowledge that they have implicit bias. I'm talking everybody I've ever worked with. So when I worked in Southfield, we would get a student from Detroit, and the implicit bias would be that child is unprepared for education in Southfield Public Schools. Before we meet them, before that kid sits in the class, like that's the overtone of why things happen. And if that student is starting to not have success, we're blaming Detroit Public Schools and not
right. He wasn't even there. Right. Yeah, that's
but then when we talk about incidences and situations in Northern Oakland County and other places where you have, I always say, you have African American students and people assume, oh, well, they must live here, or the school district must be going down. My heart hurts when I hear some people talk about Farmington schools and West Bloomfield schools, because they look at the demographic shifts and think that the quality of education has dropped down. That's racism. That's implicit bias that now that the demographics have changed, the educational standard and things like that have also diminished. So it's not, but that goes back to, it's not the overt, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan, I'm a white nationalist, I'm a skinhead. It's not that. It's the fact that when Shaniqua Jones has an application for a certain job, you have already typecast Shaniqua Jones before she sits in that chair, some way, shape, or form, whether good or bad. Because I say the NBA just did it last night. You have all these NBA players whose dads played in the NBA, all of these things. And what is ESPN? And it's good stories to tug at the heartstrings, but they always talk about the kid who didn't have a father that's overcoming because he's black. So they're continuing the narrative of the absent black father. So
now, that is a problem in the inner city communities for sure. And you know what? God bless these kids for putting it up and doing what they got to do. I mean, me and my wife were just talking this morning. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no.
There's nothing more fierce than a black woman going to whoop her son's ass when she sees him. Like, you see him on Facebook, she'll show up right at a protester. What the hell are you doing? Start smacking them and stuff. I'm like, you know, a lot of these women love their kids, no doubt about it, and they will do what they have to do without a father in the picture. Like, you see it.
But now for me, I'm just a guy that played football and went to college, and I got a good job right out of college because I had some good relationships, and that I've just built relationships that have helped me and people have looked out for me. But my parents got divorced when I was right before my adolescence. And because my father was originally from Mobile, Alabama, and he was older, he moved back to Mobile, Alabama. So I didn't have a father in my home from second half of middle school through high school. My mom loved me. My father loved me. My father was a long-distance phone call away, and I spent every summer of my adolescence in Mobile with my father. But that's the issue, is we create these narratives where I work in Lake Orion now, and I have the same kids. I have parents that are divorced, that bicker over being divorced. I have mothers that are parenting their kid by themselves, and those kids don't look like me. Those kids look like you. We got trailer parks out there in Lake Orion.
So I look like I'm from a trailer park?
No, I'm just saying, when I say look like you, I'm talking about skin complexion. But but it's those things of the story that we believe is behind everything is what and those are great stories. You're not false about that. You should feel them, but it's like superhero comic books. They're good things, but if they get put into the wrong hands, if the vibranium makes it into the wrong hands, it can be used for evil. When we use these good stories of the persevering adolescent from the inner city, now we have typecast every adolescent in the inner city with that. And who lives in the inner cities? Black and brown people. And we assume that when they aren't persevering, it's because of an absent father, it's because of all these stereotypes. No. When kids aren't persevering, you know, when there's a opiate addiction in Kansas, we don't say it's because of absent dads. We blame the health industry, and we blame doctors, but we've never blamed the lack of a nuclear family from the white perspective. So I think those are the things that we have to understand, our implicit biases, which we all have, no matter what your race is. And that's how we can have discussions about racism. Because when I went to college, and we are going back, when I went to college in Findlay, Ohio, middle of Hancock County, Ohio, my roommates can say, I got pulled over every other week, it seemed like. Whether it was license plate light out, whether I stopped over the line at a stop sign, the hood of my car was over the line, whether I was doing a 38 and a 35. And I tell people all the time, they had the right to pull me over. But would they pull everybody over for that situation? And like I said, if it's 2:30 in the morning and you just saw me leaving Nino's bar and you just wanted to follow me, see if I was swerving there, everything, police officers do that all the time. Now, when it's 3:30 in the afternoon and I'm leaving the University of Findlay campus to drive home, what is the necessity for following then? What is the necessity to go through 3 or 4 different turns before you pull me over for my car hood being over the line?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I knew that there was problems. I know at one time there was problems in Livonia with that. I've known it. You know, as far as the way kids act, it sounds like, you know, you had a very good upbringing. And one thing I always, you know, I have 4 kids and your kids are always watching you. Okay. So if I was in the inner city and I was selling drugs and I was pulling up wads of cash all the time, my kids see that. I don't even have to say nothing. They want to be just like dad. Right. And I think that's how some of the kids don't make it out. So it's the parents' fault as far as that goes. In my opinion, I think something Ronald Reagan said years ago that I found to be true. And it always comes up in my head is, you know, teaching your kids how to act and stuff starts at your kitchen table. You know, that's where you start teaching your kids. And I looked at your Facebook page, and your kids look like they're happy. You look like you and your wife are happy. You know, you could probably see. You looked at my stuff. I spent a lot of time with my kid. My older son lives in Florida. My 2 daughters are around here. And, you know, I have a really good relationship with them. I was really super hard on my kids, really hard on them. But, you know, they call me all the time. Dad, you got me ready for this, or I had this problem. I knew exactly what to do. So, you know, some of this stuff, I just don't understand where you're coming from till we talked about it, till I'm hearing you say this, because I never dawned on it. One of my best friends all through my childhood was black. Okay. So we hung around together every day together. His name was Jerry. And he was actually, he used to always say, I'm the whitest black guy you know. He went to Catholic Central. You know what I mean? He grew up in a really good home. His mom and dad had lots of money. So I never even put that stuff together when I was younger, hanging out with him, you know, and I never really seen anybody give us a hard time that I can remember. You know, that was 100 years ago. Look how old I am. So, I mean, we were good friends. He actually rode his horse. One of his dreams was to ride his horse. Now, actually, I do think of he rode his horse all the way to Texas from Novi, Michigan.
It's a different type of cat right there. But
listen, so he got pulled over, now that I think about it, in a southern state, and they tried to arrest him and everything because he had a gun on him and stuff like that. He was riding a horse. He's a cowboy, right? I'm going to Texas. I had my rifle, my scabbard. I do remember, right? Yeah, different, but that was a different time. But he made it all the way to Texas.
Second Amendment guy.
Yeah. John don't smile that much.
No, but one thing I'll say, Kevin, and this is a perspective change of me in my work. When I worked at Southfield, I tell people all the time, we were hard as hell on kids. We had 0 tolerance for things that we said were criminal behavior. If you did it in the streets, we don't want that in the building. This is a place for education. This is a place for learning. We will not accept these things. But we were so heavy-handed because we knew the world they would go into, and they cannot make those same mistakes. When I'm now at Lake Orion, and this isn't an indictment of Lake Orion, I look at things and we are so much more forgiving in Lake Orion. And it's not that white privilege. We give every kid benefit of the doubt out there. We don't want to be heavy-handed. We're not a judicial system. We're an educational entity. But the one thing I will say is, looking at adolescents from different communities and things like that, whether you're good or bad, you should get treated the same. So why can't the black kid from the inner city with the crap parents, why can't they just be bad as every other child that makes bad decisions. And I'll take it back 15 years ago, my first experience in high schools and things like that. I was in Hamler, Ohio. And the amount of people that I've met that have been drinking since their teenage years blew my mind, because none of us really drank or partied or did anything in Southfield, or unless I wasn't invited, the way it was open and accepted in a community that didn't look like me. So kids do the same things. The goal is to treat kids the same. So that kid that chooses to make bad decisions, when he's black, treat him like a child making a bad decision, educate him, get him or her to correct the behavior. But all too often, whether it's dealings with law enforcement or in schools, that kid gets treated like a guilty criminal. And that's where it's not fair. And when we're looking at things, that kid gets treated like a guilty criminal because of racial undertones and implicit bias that exist in certain systems. When you see 15 black kids hanging out on the corner, it's called loitering. When you see 15 white kids hanging out, they're outside playing, having fun. That's because of implicit bias, because it's, well, what are the black kids doing on the corner? What we have to get over those things to even say, if they're doing wrong, we treat them like kids that do wrong, but we know that they're still kids. If you look at numbers of arrest for children that would be considered minors, so under the age of 18, and criminal penalties as adults for children of color compared to their counterparts that are white, and I'm talking percentages, it's such imbalance. So the kid from Pontiac or the kid from Auburn Hills, it doesn't matter that they did wrong if they're a kid. Why is the black kid all of a sudden, charged as an adult in an armed robbery? Because we can't have the black kids do that, because you think he's going to become a predicate felon. And that's what I mean by, it's not the overt racism, it is the racism within systems that create these narratives. You mentioned your buddy. I've had people say to me, well, you're the whitest black guy I know, because I know like a couple country songs. I said, I lived in Findlay, Ohio for 5 years. Like, I had to learn something just by sitting there at a bar and hearing the music. Like, I don't want to say, there's not much diversity of country music back between 2000 and 2005 at a bar. I Love This Bar came on every damn day. Like, it just came on. But the thing about it is, when we say this black guy acts white, what are those characteristics that make him white? He speaks eloquently. He doesn't fit some stereotypical mold of dress and attire. He is cultured in music. What are these things? But then when we say that the opposite is happening, oh, this white kid is the blackest white guy I know, it is some form of negative stereotype or characterization that he is perpetuating. He is sagging his pants. He is
rapping,
acting tough. He is.
I will tell you, this is no shit. My son's best friend through high school, his name's Cameron. We should get him on this show. He is a white guy that is black. He's trapped in a black man's body. He says it himself. It's crazy. But you know what? He hung around our house the whole time. He just called me a couple weeks ago. Mr. Brown, how are you doing? Just out of the blue, and talked to me.
But Kevin, where did he grow up?
Commerce, Michigan.
Good. All right. So he either went to, if he's in Commerce, he probably, depending on the age, he went to Wall Lake Northern or Wall Lake Central.
He went to Wall Lake Northern.
Big, nice, beautiful school. In a lot of those communities, that is a non-transitional community, meaning over 80% of the residents of Commerce live in homes. Not many.
Yeah, they opened it up the last 2 years. The kids were in school. Kids from Pontiac and stuff came.
Yeah, but overall, you don't have a transient community. It's like Cameron probably went to Wall Lake elementary schools, middle schools, all of these things. So is it that he's being white, or is he fitting the appropriate environment for where he is? So when I would go to Mobile, Alabama, people didn't talk like me. I don't care what color you are. No one talked like me, because down south, they have a certain dialect. They have an accent. If I were to spend every summer there, then I would start saying things, even when I came back, that made me code switch down there. So I don't have cousins down there. I got my kinfolk. It's things like that. Did Cameron just fit the environment where he lived, not a racial demographic of where he lived? So I have friends from Southfield that are white. They're not acting black. They just act like everybody else from Southfield. That's it.
Yeah, no, he acted. He wanted to be Eminem. He wanted to be Eminem. That was his thing. It was kind of funny. You know how we met him? He stole my son's iPod. Back then, iPod minis came out. Remember, they're like $299. He stole my son's iPod. And I remember sitting there thinking, we met him and everything, and got the iPod back and realized his dad was not the greatest guy, and his mom was in the picture. So me and my wife took him and bought him an iPod himself. And I remember he just clicked with our family ever since then. He was a good kid. We helped a lot of younger kids like that. Another one of his friends was named Terrell. He was a black kid. He came. They lived in a great big house and everything, but it was a broken house inside. The dad drank. The mom was on pills and stuff like that. He spent a lot of time. So I think it's everywhere. I think you learn how not to act from your parents, or how to act from your parents, right?
Yeah.
You learn
50% of marriages in America end in divorce. So
isn't that crazy?
So that's not white or black. That's relational. So if you're talking about it now, there are stereotypes, there are statistics that say the probability of an African-American male or adolescent living in the same household as both biological parents, that exists. It is a discrepancy. It is a problem. But that does not fit, like you're saying, every mold of a black male or female that you see growing up. The bad kid can come from that big, beautiful house. The good kid can come from the crappiest environment and just work their way out of the gutter. For white and black kids, for brown and yellow kids, it exists. On the first episode, we talked about racism. I read a book, and it talked about some positive racial stereotypes, not even just the negatives. So like, all Asians are smart. And it talked about, like, this is the ideal minority group, Asians. And people don't categorize like, oh, yes, you're talking about the Chinese immigrants, Vietnamese refugee immigrants from the 70s whose families are here. But you're not talking about the Hmong people that live in the inner cities. You're not talking about the Laos people that live in the inner cities. These other Asian populations that are not, fitting that future scientist norm. And but that's where it comes from, because there are stereotypes, and racism has to end from us addressing the stereotypes and the systems that create those stereotypes.
I think it's getting better over the years, don't you? Generation to generation, is getting better. Or you think it's getting worse?
Cornel West made a great point one time. I mean, he repeated it from, I believe, Malcolm X, and it was something along the lines of, if you stab me with an 8-inch knife, just because you pull out 4 inches doesn't mean I'm not stabbed anymore. And 4 inches are still in me. Yes, we have tons of progress. Tons. Now, I would look at that, and you're not that old, Kevin. Like, you're only a couple years older. But here's the question I have. Would we have this same conversation in 1920, where we are now, 55 years removed from slavery. And somebody would dare to say in Jim Crow South, where there is a black and white water fountain, where you would say, hey, don't you think we've progressed from slavery? Like, yeah, thank you. I'm free to be segregated and crapped on and treated like I'm less than a human. We still don't have voting rights. We still don't have those. Where it was progression from slavery into Jim Crow South. It was progression into segregated South. But then you had Jim Wallace standing at the University of Alabama not wanting to let students in because of the color of their skin. And we have video recordings of that because it's not really that long ago. So I think, yes, we have progressed. The worry I have is what happened is we have created a change in what is normalized behavior, but we have not changed the heart of it. So I believe that we understand that being a skinhead, carrying a Confederate flag, putting that Confederate flag sticker on your car, those are not acceptable behaviors by people that we will say are educated and helping this country progress. That behavior is not acceptable. But just because you don't do that doesn't mean we've changed the heart. When you won't interview Shaniqua Jones, who graduated from Howard University, instead you'll interview Jessica Mulligans, who went to Schoolcraft.
Yeah, but you're painting everybody with the same brush. I mean, sometimes that happens. I have no doubt, but I've never done that. So it's not like everybody. It's there has been progress because in 1920 or back then that was the norm, right? Everybody did it. I'm sure some people didn't like it, but they went along with the norm, right? Or the people who stood up didn't go along with it, kind of just played. We see movies about it. There's a lot of people in town, they're picking on the black guy that came in and the town got together or whatever. So I think everybody, there's bad people in every crowd like we talked about before.
But that's the thing is, like, I wouldn't call you bad. So I'm not getting into your personal, but when your son brought your daughter-in-law, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the first time when you met her, you noticed her physical difference. Or first time you were ever aware of who she was, you noticed that she was black, right?
He dated black girls, so it really didn't.
But even no matter when the first one happened, you notice. Everybody notices. That's one thing I think is a big progressive thing that African Americans, blacks want to get out to the world. Is like, yeah, I'm black and I'm proud of being black. Acknowledge me being black. Acknowledge what I go through. But when you met your son's girlfriends and things like that, or your son's friends, I don't think you addressed them differently. I don't believe that you treated them differently or anything like that. But there are implicit biases associated with thought process that could happen, and it's not making you racist, but it's an acknowledgement that we see people different and it leads to stories differently. So if I met my wife's father or someone else I dated's father, I'm not shocked if they met me and said, "Oh, this is a black guy. Tell me more about him."
Did what happened? Tell me the story.
No, but I mean, it's
no.
happened all the time. I dated a girl in college.
Okay.
I met a girl in college. We were dating. Her cousin was a good friend of mine because I met her because my roommate, they all went to the same high school. Her cousin used to come down, drink with us, party with us, hang with us. He went to Defiance College. We went to Defiance. I slept on his couch. I'm Vernon the good guy. All of a sudden, he acted real different when Vernon the good guy was dating his cousin. And I don't think it was a different opinion about Vernon, it was generations before him wondering about Vernon. And to them, Vernon was some guy from Detroit. So what do you assume? Black guy from Detroit. You know, you're not assuming that he lived on a northwest suburb, or even in Detroit, he lived in Rosedale Park. Houses that are, 2,400 square feet. You don't assume those things. So that's what not everyone is racist. We're not painting everybody with a broad stroke. But what we do have to do is acknowledge who we truly, things that we believe, and we have to actively work to move past them. So yes.
Yeah. When I seen your name and you friend requested me, I can honestly say that when I looked it up, I didn't say, "Oh, look, he's black." I said, "Oh, look at how happy he is. Look at his kids, his wife." I didn't even think that, but maybe I'm odd. I don't know.
But no. That's normal. Like you would have to be really messed up to just see a person and automatically, like, that's overt racism. That's like definition number one racism.
There is people like that, and I know it. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is, and these are the things that have led to racial discussions, when we see what happened to George Floyd, when we see what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, when we hear these scenarios, we create, oh, well, what did he do? Can you imagine if George Floyd is probably 4 years younger than you. I can't imagine if Kevin was detained for anything and a police officer kneel on Kevin's neck within view of other citizens. I can't imagine that. Can you?
That whole George Floyd thing sucked. Plain and simple. He didn't deserve to die. That's just all I got to say about it. He didn't deserve it.
Kevin, I'm going to be honest. This is what I'll go back to about kids. Kevin, because you have a counterfeit 20, you don't deserve to be detained.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened with that whole thing, honestly.
I'm going to help you, Kevin.
We don't know. We know what we've been told. You know what I'm saying? We know they killed him. No doubt about it.
Right. But Kevin, this is where I'm always really skeptical of this. Why does a black man having a counterfeit $20 bill, how in the hell does that even, and I'm not talking about the police officers, I'm talking about the store owners. How does that lead to you contacting law enforcement? You know what happens if somebody hands you a fake 20? You say, "Sir, I cannot accept this bill. Unless you give me another form of currency, I cannot exchange the goods."
Yeah, what happened? Like, I heard that the guy that he worked with was one of the cops that arrested him. They were security guards together or something. There's some kind of beef or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's how much.
Why are the cops even there?
Yeah, well, they called him. Well,
exactly.
He breaking the
law. Why did they call him?
Who knows? What color is the shop owner, I wonder?
I'm going to give you two guesses, Kevin.
Black.
And I'm going to tell you the wrong one was black.
That's how much I didn't pay attention to that because I thought, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, but Kevin, that still goes back to like stereotypes and implicit bias. Like the black mom is aggressive and going to beat her child that's out there rioting.
I don't know. Maybe the store owner had background with him. Maybe it was the guy that he had the knife to his daughter's belly. Remember the belly, the pregnant lady?
I can't think of anything that already went through the judicial system. I can't think of it. I don't go into things trying to figure out why I should be accepting something that doesn't fit normal. I don't go into things trying to figure out how to make this reasonable in my mind.
No, nothing's reasonable about murdering that guy. Absolutely, yeah. I agree with that.
But that's where I go to. You're asking some great questions, because I still will go back to why. Like, and I'll say this: Detroit.
What led up?
This is one thing I hate about when people post about rioting and all these other things. There have been some racial conflicts in the city of Detroit since Detroit integrated because of the automotive industry over a century ago. There have been riots, there have been uprisings, there have been issues. The raid of the blind pig in the 60s led to Detroit riots. The murder of Malice Green did not lead to any riots. I have a friend of mine, grew up with, played Little League football with. He was at a gas station and got involved in the conflict with the gas station owner. And the gas station owner in Detroit came from behind bulletproof glass, came around and took my buddy's life. Now that gas station owner is now property of the state of Michigan, right? But that's where, when we're talking about racism, why is a African-American male that is disputing something, why is he treated as a lethal threat? Why is our narrative to figure out what that black guy might have did wrong? It's not because you're racist. It's because of racist systems that we put in place and things that keep perpetuating this ideal. You know, I'll be honest. Kenosha, Wisconsin has an uprising. I was livid when I watched the video of Kyle Rittenhouse shooting people because he thought that he was some type of patriot. Like, I was livid with that because of how dangerous I believe that is. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't kill not one black person. Now, we could, like, typecast Democrat, Republican, whatever. Those were 3 white guys involved in homicide. One white guy involved with, assault because he just got shot.
He had been shot with a pistol.
Yeah, but here's my question. Why don't I hear about the white-on-white crime happening in these riots?
Oh, believe me, I will tell you this. That is a conversation, you know, when they had the BLM protest in Howell here.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the state of Michigan employee that was saying she's going to come down and burn down Howell and all this stuff?
I heard about it a couple of
Okay, whatever. That's a state of Michigan employee. I hope she got fired for that. But back to my story. You know who was protesting the Black Lives Matter? Was a bunch of little middle schoolers. There wasn't even black people at the Black Lives Matter thing. I'm like,
that's because it's not about. It shouldn't have to be black people that protest for civil rights and justice for blacks. It should be people that believe in civil rights and justice.
And I believe in all lives matter. I don't just mean Black lives matter. I believe all lives matter, right? Everybody is somebody's child, father's, whatever, right?
But that's not disputable. That's not a disputable conversation. Nobody's ever questioned that. There's no actions that have ever implied that. There is no level of historical evidence of a life not mattering except for a black life. Like,
no, that's not true. I mean, murder's murder.
No, I'm not saying that there's never been a criminal penalty, but I'm talking about when we have seen atrocities towards blacks for hundreds of years, it has never been action that has directly shown support for that. So if I go to and we can talk history, if I'm looking at World War II, right? America gets involved in World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But the rest of the world was involved with this because of the inhumane treatment of a group of people in Germany. We all understand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world did not accept what was happening in Germany. There was no world war for the transcontinental slave trade. There was no world war that jumped in during the Civil War. That was an in-house fight. How can the world know of such atrocities and not get involved? Now you're talking historically, it's not the same, right? We can have the Spanish-American War over moving borders so that we can annex Texas. We can do all of these things. But there is nothing historically or no group of people historically that we can see that people have not treated lives the same. In 1776, when it said in the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. That wasn't a true statement. All were not equal. All men were not equal by definition. So you don't have to rebut Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter, because all was always considered and it excluded blacks. That's historically. But even when we keep going up our chronological American history, when we're looking at the Emancipation Proclamation, we still don't have all given every right within the Constitution. Black women weren't even allowed to be voting citizens until the 60s. My mom is 73 years old. That means that my mom could not vote when she turned 18 in America. I couldn't marry my wife in America until 1968 or 69. So there is no evidence when we're saying all, because that means we want to encompass whites, and we want to encompass, oh no, we're not talking about Mexicans, we're not talking about Latin people, we're not talking about Muslims. When people say Black Lives Matter, it is because throughout 400 plus years of history, there's evidence that it has not. And whenever events happen, such as what initiated the Black Lives Matter group and movement, Trayvon Martin is treated by a neighborhood watchman as a criminal because he looked like a criminal. Okay, I get it. Guy has a hood on, walking through the neighborhood. All right, that may look suspicious. He also is holding Skittles and a beverage, which don't look suspicious.
Yeah, was it George Zimmerman? That guy went off the deep end. Okay, that guy was his own worst enemy, right?
But that's what we always are able to individualize these acts, but we don't want to acknowledge the motivation behind these acts. Derek Chauvin is just one rogue ass cop, right? If George Floyd doesn't die, Derek Chauvin is just another cop that treated a black man like shit.
Well, I think all cops should have body cams, should be mic'd and have cameras, and I think all that's about. I think cops are out of control. Not all of them, but there's a lot of cops that are out of control. Right. No doubt about it.
Right, but that's where I go with the All Lives Matter compared to Black Lives Matter. We're not talking about the same thing. Like there's no evidence. I don't want to say it like this. White male, Kevin, you have been top of the food chain. Anglo-Saxon male, top of the food chain for about 800 damn years. Like it's fit.
Yeah, that's the way the world works. It's not my fault, just like it's not your fault, right? It's just that's the world we are born into.
It's our fault when we know it and we don't work to change it. You acknowledge it's wrong. If you acknowledge it's wrong, so if I see a child standing in the middle of the street and a car coming, and I can able-bodied, no risk of injury to myself, go get that child and pull him out of the street. We would say you did the right thing. But if we see a racist system that continually rears its head into the hearts of individuals, and we do nothing but say, hey, once their heart kind of gets exposed, that's a bad person, that's a bad person, that's a bad person. That's the part to it. When we try and lump rioting into the concept of Black Lives Matter, and you did it, and I tell people all the time, in Southfield Public Schools, there was a school, Southfield Regional Academic Campus. It's the alternative school in Southfield. Former principal of that school, Marty Baldwin, never referred to it to what everybody else referred to it as. Most people call it SRAC, S-R-A-C, SRAC. He never acknowledged that. He always called it Southfield Regional Academic Campus, because when it became SRAC, the alternative school, people stereotyped his kids, people stereotype the level of education in that building because it was easier. You don't really refer to like Southfield Regional Academic Campus and think it's like some bad place. But once you minimalize it to an acronym, now we can do some things. Black Lives Matter is not going to be a disputable topic if you said it in your church, in your workplace, anything like that. But when you call it BLM, and then you can associate BLM with an organization that you can tie some possible anti-American, anti-patriotic platform to, then it becomes acceptable. So if I said, if a woman said that, hey, maternal rights matter, would you turn around and say paternal rights matter? No, it's just, all right, we get it. You're a woman, your mothers, your caregivers, your rights matter. But all of a sudden with Black Lives Matter, the whole Black Lives Matter never excluded Kevin. It's just like, and I'll give you another kind of example, Kevin, is historically Black colleges and universities. BET. People looked at those things, like the way people treat Black Lives Matter now with All Lives Matter, that shit's been happening for decades. People just act like they didn't know this. People question, well, how come there could be HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, but we don't have white universities? Because every university founded in America initiated excluding Black people. So they could only go to universities that were giving grants to even develop post-slavery. We talk about BET, and people say, well, what if there was a white entertainment television network? Have you ever watched CMT? They aren't catering to me.
Well, back when you were in college, they were.
No, they still weren't catering to me. But those are the things, Kevin, is people in America continue, and like I said, we have made tons of progress in America. The things that I say that are not far out of our memories, such as voting rights for Black women, such as interracial marriage, obviously we have moved mountains, but we still haven't overcome. Like, we still haven't moved to these places because we have not acknowledged as a whole body the things that have happened and moved on and atoned for them.
And I doubt that in our lifetime we'll see it. I doubt in our lifetime we'll see it. You know, I don't know which way the world's going. I mean, did you ever think we'd lose so much stuff that we've lost already since, you know, COVID's hit? I mean, things have changed dramatically, you know. I don't want to get into politics, but we got a governor that thinks she's a one-man show and she's just going to make all the decisions. She's not even following the laws, whatever. But listen, I really wanted to come on this show because me and Johnny had that tiff, and I wanted Johnny to know exactly what kind of person I am. Mm-hmm. So, you know, even when I walk in there, there's no animosity between us. I want him to understand what kind of guy I am. That's one of the reasons I want to do this show.
Well, you know what? I know Johnny's moderating. I wanted you to come on this show, Kevin, because you know what? I don't know your upbringing. I don't know anything. You didn't know me before I saw you wanted to come on the show. I added you on Facebook. And the thing that's happening, and I mean, you could go back and look at the shows about COVID, the shows about the election process, all these things that we've talked about. If you sit in a bubble, then you only are taking in oxygen from that bubble.
I agree. If your Facebook page is all conservative, no liberals on, I agree. But you know what we just proved? That we could sit down, two people that voted for two different guys, and we could have a civil conversation without a screaming match and name calling and everything like that. I mean, that's a big deal nowadays. You know, you said it yourself. Social media is a cesspool. You want to ruin your day, go on social media and put one of your opinions out there.
but here's the difference, though, Kevin, is the reason why we're able to do this is what Generation X and baby boomers say about these millennials and zennials is they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to talk anymore. All they do is text and tweet and all these other things. Well, hell, I just watched an election cycle where I'm watching baby boomers and I'm watching Generation X individuals do the exact same thing. And the reason why we don't call each other names and things like that, because even though we're a distance, you're looking at someone, you're hearing someone, you have civil discourse. We talked about it last week. One thing we taught at one of the schools I worked at, KA building, we taught students accountability talk, where you say, hey, I hear your opinion, but I took it this way. I saw it differently. My experiences are different. And I have a friend, buddy of mine, I coached his son. And it worries me when he talks about certain things, especially when regarding race, regarding social justice issues. And his son is mixed. His ex-girlfriend or ex-wife is Black. And I pray sometimes that he doesn't have to experience the negativity and the racism in the world through an experience of his son. He won't have that experience because, like I said, he's an Anglo-Saxon male. But his son may have experiences, may get treated away in life. I don't want him to be blindsided by the fact that nobody's going to see his son and think about him. They're going to see his son and think about his mother's history. And that kind of sucks. And until we attack the heart of racism and implicit bias, and we discuss those things, that progress that we've made stops. The reason why we've made so much progress that you acknowledge is because at some point somebody stood up and said, this shit isn't fair and this shit isn't right. So there was somebody that stood up and said, slavery is wrong. There were abolitionists that said slavery is wrong. There were people during the civil rights movement that were freedom riders that went from the north to the south to say, hey, this is bullshit. And for us to think that we're going to change it, I agree with you, but I disagree, because when my father I went to visit my father before he passed away in Alabama, took two of my roommates from college. We went out in Mobile, Alabama, and I still remember him waking up and talking to them the next morning. I kind of gave them time with my dad, and my dad said, if I were to do what you all did last night, my father told them, if me and two white guys did what you all did last night, we would have been hung. That was my father that said that, not my grandfather, not my great-grandfather. My father told my two roommates, if we did in Mobile, Alabama, at 21 years old, what you three did last night, we would have been hung. So my father acknowledged that the progress that existed. And I'll even kind of throw out a little caveat. Reason why we're not making the progress that we want is because we got really good at hiding our bigotry in America. So, Johnny, you just been taking it.
Yeah, Johnny, you still awake?
No sound, Johnny. Oh, Johnny, no sound again.
He's taking a deep breath, I could tell.
This happened a few weeks ago when we were talking about the Second Amendment.
Well, I was wondering why he wasn't saying anything or acknowledging when I was talking. Now I know.
Oh man, we got the technical difficulties
But
again.
listen, I'd like to come on whenever you guys want. Hit me up. I'm cool. I'll talk about all kinds of stuff. I really don't care. My opinion is my opinion. Yours is yours. But we proved that we could talk to each other, and we have obviously different viewpoints. But you know what? I was enlightened quite a bit tonight, believe it or not.
Yep.
So.
Hey, always good talk, Johnny. Man, I know this bothering Johnny. Is it your mic? Check the source of your mic. Nothing. 1 minute. 1 minute. We're going uno momento.
One momento, yeah. And I tell you what.
I also, I mean, just kind of slowly develop our conversation. To not talk about politics is difficult in these times, but I really think that these conversations, when you see another perspective, that is what leads to the experience. I didn't know how you were going to come on, but one thing I even acknowledged last week, I get really frustrated when white males tell me about like issues of Black community and things like that. It blows my mind kind of, because like I said in the beginning, you either have experience to speak from or you have in-depth education on something to speak from. And if you have done neither of those, it's irresponsible to talk about. And I think a lot of people get into social media comments and platforms, and they post those hot takes, they post their views. And because the people's circles are like-minded people, they get a lot of these pat on the backs and these attaboys, and it continues to perpetuate an issue from kind of an immature standpoint, where I can say something erroneous or wrong, but as long as people like it and tell me to keep speaking the truth, I'm gonna keep posting nonsense on Facebook. And one thing in scientific experiments, you always have a constant to measure against, and then you acknowledge independent and dependent variables. People should do that when they're talking about political issues, race issues, social justice. Is, all right, what's my constant here? What's my independent variable? You know, what's working no matter what? What's the dependent variable? What changes based on something else?
Well, I personally, to sum up, I have one strong feeling, and this goes across everything. I think people are too soft nowadays with their kids. I think everybody's too soft, and I think if people had a little bit more of a backbone, they'd be able to deal with stuff a little bit different. You know, we forgot our lunch when I was in school. You got a thing of white milk and a cheese sandwich. What that made you think is, oh my God, I'm never eating that shit again. I'm going to make sure my lunch is in my bag. We got a email from Howell Public Schools that the kids are stressed out, so they're going to go ahead and take next week off, the whole week off for Thanksgiving, because they need to relax their stress. And my son's like, Dad, I'd rather go to school and see my friends. What stresses me out is sitting home all the time now. So, and I'm sure there's more to it. But my point to you is, I think that people need to toughen the hell up. I'm sure you've seen it in the schools. You know, people are soft. I was talking to my friend Jesse yesterday about that, and he said that they were at a baseball game, a softball game, and his mom was 84 years old. They lived in Toledo, and they're Black. And he said, my friend said, hey, Jesse, hand me some chips, throw me some chips. And Jesse threw him a bag of chips. She got up and slapped Jesse and said, how disrespectful that is. She's like, I'm your mom. I'm 84 years old. I'll still slap the shit out of you. And I thought, you know what? That's a guy that was raised right, because my dad would have done the same thing to me.
Right.
You know?
But the one thing I say, even to acknowledge, like, people being soft, like, I despise that term, like snowflakes, because you know, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, if you were getting treated like shit at school, you got to go home, no matter how your home life was, and you got to escape school. Vice versa, if people had shitty home lives, they got to go to school and escape home. With technology and the world we live in now, people don't have those opportunities. You know,
especially right now, they're trapped at home in a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, but it is ridiculous to think like people now are softer. Like, I would say kids, because kids now are very resilient. And I think we are better educated to what those feelings that we used to have are. So what we used to call nerves, what we used to call goosebumps, what we used to call, you know, funny feelings in our stomach, now kids are able to acknowledge what they are, and people are able to assist in that. I'm a big football guy, and back in the day, when you would get hit hard and you would say, I saw stars or my bell got rung, now we understand that that was a concussion. Doesn't mean a football player now is softer. It means that we actually know medically what was wrong and how dangerous that was. So I think that's the difference, is the environments are completely different. I mean, kids, just like the George Floyd situation, kids have access to see that. Like, kids are seeing things in the world that they've never seen before, you know? So I think it's just different. And also how we actually acknowledge what certain issues are is what changes. But thanks for coming on. We were wondering, you know, how this was going to go, but it's good talk on race and racism in America, and a good talk about awareness of what we're looking at, you know. So, oh, Johnny, man, one day this show is going to run flawless. We're going to be on time. We're going to have sound from everybody. Is going to be perfect. Try it, Johnny. Nothing. You want to try a different device? But that'll kick us all out.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Nothing.
Now you're frozen too.
Oh, man. No, I just wasn't moving.
My internet's terrible here. Out here in the country.
Johnny, send in the messages if you want me to close out or something.
Yeah, I just tried to chat and open chat, close chat, open. I don't know anyway.
All right.
All right, man. I'll see you guys later.
All right. Nice meeting and talking to you, Kevin. All right. Sorry, Johnny. We'll try it again next week. But I know Johnny always puts out this caveat. Just like Kevin came on here, if you are out there, want to talk about some things, we're open, safe place. Sometimes we'll talk at you, you get educated. Sometimes we'll hear something from your viewpoint. But sorry, Johnny.